It is, and the nice thing is, I think for the first time, certainly in the post-Nixon era of this country, the game change is constructed in every aspect of this by the very institutions that probably need to have their own, reconstruction or destruction or creative evolution. I think that it's fascinating, for example, that the war that we find ourselves in right now is a war that we've financed by debt. We actually didn't pay for this war by creating the military infrastructure that was created around the Second World War. In the Second World War, we created the Small War Plants Corporation, which was really the birth of small business at an institutional policy level in this country. We created the small business input and the small business impulse in this country, where it became a national economic priority to support the Second World War. I don't believe that you actually can take a foundation, which is based in that kind of dynamic, and forget that all the stories you've built on top of that foundation aren't still standing on a foundation. The foundation was based on war production. And that is a foundation that we can't replicate in the Iraq and Afghanistan, now Pakistan conflicts, because we've outsourced an enormous amount of where the highest value is coming into the infrastructure that supports the war. If you look at where the GDP portion of the war dollars are being spent right now, they're primarily being spent with strategic integrators and with systems analysts and with nation building consultants and with a whole bunch of services. And the great thing about services is that they actually generate no residual transferable value. Once you're done with a war, you can't find the next place to do nation building. So if I have a raft of consultants and experts who actually know how they want to build civil society in Iraq, if they know how to build a civil society in Afghanistan, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the same thing we had at the end of the Second World War, the same thing that we even had at the end of Vietnam and Korea, which was the ability to come back and say, okay, we're not going to make weapons, we're going to make transportation systems, we're not going to make weapons, we're going to make bridges. Those kinds of core competencies where we can transition productivity out of war into peacetime, we're missing this time around. And we're missing for two reasons. First, we debt financed the war. So we didn't actually spend what we actually had, we spent what we didn't have. Second of all, we didn't purchase from that which we created, we purchased from that which we outsourced. So we have two dynamics that we haven't seen before. Because of that, we don't get to end the war and come back with the let's bring the troops home, let's bring the energy home, and let's reinvigorate the transition of this economy, because we're not transitioning this economy. We actually have to do something new. We have to do something new that understands that for the first time, we will have to confront resource utilization. The innovation of planned obsolescence. Think about that word. That was politically correct. You want planned obsolescence. You don't want to sell razors, you want to sell the razor blade. Right? We're going to have to rethink that. We may actually need to sell razors again. We actually may need to sell quality, not quantity. We may need to realize that we can't just infinitely make plastics that have a life cycle of 10 uses or 100 uses, or in the case of water bottles, a single use. We actually may have to say, we're going to have to consume more expensive less, rather than less expensive more. Now that's probably bad news if you built your infrastructure around the notion of unlimited raw materials going into unlimited consumption. But I believe the great opportunity that's in front of humanity is to realize that maybe we'll actually have to go back to, I don't know, canteens and thermoses instead of having walls and walls and walls and walls and walls of shelf space of plastic water bottles. And guess what? We actually may, as a civilization, be better off for that. We may be better off as a civilization realizing that going to the proverbial well, okay, going to the watering supply outpost is actually how we rediscover some community. It's where we actually get the news of what's going on with our neighbor. It's where we get those things. The notion that we will always have a municipal water system that we ignore. Here we sit in New York. New York, where tap water is something that New York has always been proud of. But you can't walk past a deli in New York where at least 5% of the shelf space in that deli is dedicated to plastic water that has been flown in, imported in glass jars and plastic jars and everything else. Well, guess what? We don't need that. And we're going to have to think through the assumption of bottling glass bottles in a northern European spring and flying filled glass bottles with water in those bottles to a shelf at a deli in New York. We're going to have to rethink that, because flying the bottles may be problematic, shipping the bottles may be problematic, the cost of making the bottles may be problematic. All of those things coming together may actually, when we do the social calculation, be less valuable than drinking water from New York. Those are the kinds of opportunities where, when we focus not on the perpetuation of the status quo, but we actually go back and say, what value did we actually create? What was the value that was being created? And when we understand that, when we ask the fundamental question of value when it is reflected only in phenotypic consumption, which unfortunately is where we've built the economic systems and the models today, is a system that neither can be contained or maintained. And more importantly, I'm not sure that if we actually sit and think about it, we even want to have it go forward. I'm not sure that we want to have a world in which our children don't know what a tap water is, don't know what a fountain, water fountain is, don't know what the beauty of actually having clean water in a stream is. I'm not sure that I want my children to know that the only place they can buy water is at a gas station. Because guess what? I actually remember a little stream in Lytle Creek in California where water ran out of the snow melt in the San Gabriel Mountains. And when you leaned down and drank out of that stream, you tasted water the way nature actually made water. And I've never seen a piece of plastic, I've never seen a piece of glass, I've never seen any man-made structure that can capture the beauty of that stream. And until we understand that it was in those streams where humanity actually found humanity, it was not in the plastic water bottle, it was not in the glass water bottle, it was not paying thousands of dollars for water when you can just drink out of a tap. That wasn't creating value. That was not creating an economic system that's sustainable. It was actually a euphemism for value that didn't really exist, because the value of that stream in the San Gabriels is far, far, far greater than the value of every bottle of water on every shelf. The difference is that I actually had to be responsible to understand that to drink from that stream, I had to care for the environment in which that stream existed. That's real value. And when we can rediscover that, which is where I believe we're going as a civilization, we will find out what real value is. We will actually understand how to start measuring real value, where we understand that the all-in cost is inclusive of not only what we get, but what we've walked away. And it's by walking back to that stream that I think we actually find our way forward.